Hey everybody, this is Chris DeFurio with Keys to the Shop, and welcome to another episode of Shift Break. This is a short 5 or so minute episode of Keys to the Shop meant to give you some quick and convenient tips or tools that will help you thrive at work. So thank you to those of you who have reached out to tell me that you've been enjoying these episodes. I have been enjoying producing them. Every Thursday these come out. And we've had some great topics so far. Now, today's episode is something that we are all guilty of doing, and that is making the customer the enemy. Now, what I'm talking about when I'm saying making the customer the enemy, I'm talking about a particular way that we have of creating a caricature, demonizing a customer, throwing them under the bus. We could keep going here, but when they step out of line, when they don't do things the way that we want them to do or that we're used to them doing them, if they say the wrong word, if they're awkward, or they do little things or have quirks that cause us to create, have this dialogue in our mind about how they're, how stupid this customer is, or we take it personally and we think that they're doing it to, belittle us because we're a barista. When people put their credit cards on the counter instead of in my hand, or the change on the counter instead of in my hand, most of the time it's just something they do that's, maybe not the greatest, but they're not doing it to make me pay for something that I've done to them. It's not personal. But what I do as a barista, and what all of us have done, and I say I do this, but I used to do this a lot more, is I start to just kind of internally go like, this jerk just did this thing that I don't like, and I'm just going to create this image where, I draw horns on their forehead, and, now this customer's the devil, and I'm going to talk with my coworkers about them. Boy, I can't wait to share this story back in the, barista closet or the kitchen or whatever it is. Like we gossip about customers, we create this internal dialogue, about how terrible they are, and then we just go on and on and on. So this is a huge problem in cafes because it comes out in the way that we serve the public. Maxwell Mooney used to have a tagline on one of his social media accounts that Maxwell Mooney is the owner of Narrative Coffee in Everett, Washington. People are not systems. I love that. I love that saying because we are serving people and it gets messy sometimes and it's awkward. We are awkward too. We just don't think we are because we're behind the counter and we've got this workflow that we're used to. So we kind of look like we know what we're doing and we're cool. But man, we've got our own awkward stuff and we don't dance the dance according to the way the server wants at the restaurant every time. We don't act perfectly. We have very little tolerance for the way that people act in our cafes, mainly because I think we've grown to a certain sense of entitlement. Like we're entitled to have people follow the way that we do things or else bear the wrath of our gossip, bear the wrath of how we're going to think about them from now on. People are valuable. People are flawed. And the problem with having this kind of an atmosphere in a coffee shop is that you start to have an us versus them mentality. The dumb customer and the savvy barista. This is unfortunately something that we in the third wave or progressive coffee movement in these high-end specialty shops, people assume that we don't like them. In many cases, it's because we have cultivated this mentality towards them that they see in the way that they're treated. They can sense that something is wrong, that you're withholding hospitality because you feel slighted at some mysterious misstep they're not even sure they made. So when somebody doesn't know where the POS is, and you say to yourself, it's right here, I can't, how do you not see that? That little thought is a toxic thought. That right there, if left to just fester in your mind, and then you take that thought and you talk about it more and reinforce it with the aggressive nodding of heads of, other coworkers, now you're solidifying this kind of toxic mentality of an us versus them atmosphere. So charitable assumption is one of the solutions that you can employ to kind of short circuit this way of thinking of the customer. People are not going to behave like or talk like, order, etc., the way that you want them to every time. And we work with the public, so this is just part of the package that you're going to have surprising interactions with people. But what do you do with those things that make you tilt your head? Do you automatically assume the worst, or do you try to see things from an empathetic and positive point of view? Doing what Danny Meyer says in his book, Setting the Table, is giving charitable assumption to them. I assume that they just don't mean anything by it, or that, it's probably our fault for not making it more obvious where to order. They don't know very much about coffee, and that's fine. That's what we're here for, and we're going to help them, and we're going to be on their side, as he also says in the book. There's a mentality that we can have that, especially around the idea of charitable assumption, that needs to make its way past our internal dialogue and even make it into the way that we talk about the customer with our coworkers. Now, immediately we think maybe that it would be hard to do, that it would be cheesy, because it's so much easier for us to rant. Nobody really rants that much about positive things. It's much easier to rant about negative things, and we just lean into that easy road. If more of us took charitable assumption as the path when reacting to the missteps of the customer in the cafe, and I put that misstep in air quotes over here, then I think we're going to find it easier to serve people. We're going to be less unhappy at work, and customers will start to notice that there's a bit more of a presence of hospitality in the cafe. And, each of us taking an individual responsibility for controlling that internal dialogue and redirecting it to the positive is going to make a huge impact on the way people view specialty coffee and their experience in our stores. So take an honest look at the kind of things that you're doing to create this enmity between yourself and the customer, and to take steps to short circuit that and to dismantle that sort of negative foundation that for a lot of us have laid just naturally over time. We've just kind of put it in play, and we talk about the customer and laugh about them and blah, blah, blah. It takes some work to undo, but in my experience, as being a particularly salty barista in my past, over time I've been able to employ more empathy and more charitable assumption, and I'm still working at it, but I'm really the better for it. And I know the customers that I serve are the better for it as well. So employ charitable assumption. If you haven't got Danny Meyer's book in your hands and read it, I absolutely recommend Setting the Table. And I hope that today's episode was helpful for you. So thanks again for listening, and I'll see you all next week for another episode of Shift Break with Keys to the Shop.